Welcome to Dedicated. I'm your host, Doug Brunt. Today we're with Elizabeth Staple. She's worked in media relations for the NFL for two franchises, the New York Giants and the New England Patriots. So her career has taken her to 3 Super Bowls, and she was dealing with all the incoming media hoopla at the time that Tom Brady and Bridget Moynihan broke up. She was a great communicator in that role, and she's a great communicator in her new role as an author. She's out with her debut novel, The Snap, which is a thriller with great humor. It also has very smart commentary on what it's like to work inside a high-stakes, high-pressure office environment, and also a juicy behind-the-scenes look at working in an NFL franchise. Elizabeth, or Beth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. And we're doing so the audience knows it's a kind of early in the morning, but we're having an old-fashioned and going for it. So I will get started on making that. This is your cocktail, your go-to?
This is my go-to, and it comes from my football days because anytime I would go out with my football players, not quite as classy as an old-fashioned, but it would start with Jack Daniel's shots, and you had to keep up with the football players.
Oh, my God.
And you didn't have to have another drink for the rest of the night, but it had to start with a Jack Daniel's shot. And then as I grew up a little bit, it evolved into whiskey drinking and then the old-fashioned. So that's how I came to this being my drink.
So once you sort of showed your mettle early on,
Exactly. You were good the rest of the night. You just had to do that at the start.
So was this kind of a regular thing? Like people from the team would get out for drinks?
Only in, I'm
like
sure we'll talk about.
Or something?
No, not with the NFL, but I did one stint in NFL Europe where we all lived together in a hotel when we were in Germany. And so that was a whole different experience because, Americans isolated in another country.
Wow. So the whole team kind of stuck together over there and would go get drinks.
Yeah.
So they're not actually, in the gym the entire time, like cocktails and...
That was like a team-sponsored after party where we would be bussed from the stadium because I think they wanted them all to be in one place, not out and about getting in trouble. So it was like, come here, we will give you the drinks, you will be in this room. And that was kind of the way they kept the leash on them.
Were they big celebrities in Germany?
No.
No, it was like you could walk around the streets. They just saw a bunch of big guys coming down the street, but it wasn't like they were recognized.
Exactly, which made my job a lot easier. Thank goodness they were not big celebrities.
I am dying to get into that because obviously you have made the NFL franchise a backdrop for your story. Mm-hmm. And just so the audience knows, I'm putting in the orange, and we're going to do a cherry garnish here for the old-fashioned.
Nice.
But there's so many incredible stories in the book, and it's clear that you write with great authority. It's clear that you lived some of these moments in bars, and so we're going to get into that for sure. I'm going to give this a quick stir here. Oh my gosh, this looks so good.
Looks really good.
Okay. A classic old-fashioned. Cheers, Beth.
Cheers.
Great to meet you.
It's my official earliest cocktail. That's really good. Thank you.
Oh, that is yummy. All right. So before we get into the juicy NFL stuff, just a quick bit about you. You are from central New York State?
Yep, I'm from outside of Syracuse.
Okay, so you know cold, you know tough winters. My wife went to Syracuse. She said you could always tell the freshmen because they wore like thin clothes and they're still trying to look pretty. And by the time they get to sophomore year, they're just like piling on the warm clothing.
Yeah, freshmen or locals maybe, because I think sometimes locals, want to look tough.
Yeah.
It's like the offensive lineman with no sleeves kind of thing.
I know, that is crazy. It's like 10 degrees out there and they've got no sleeves on. And then you went to Syracuse undergrad.
I did.
Right.
Yep.
And what was were you in the Newhouse School? There's a media school. Yeah. So that's the one. By the way, they rejected my wife from that. She's a journalist.
You know what?
They rejected her.
Me too initially. And then I had to slide in. So we're in good company there.
All right. So then you go and you studied public relations at Syracuse. And then you worked with Syracuse athletic department, your first job out of college?
So I worked there throughout college. You could do it as a student. So the whole time I was a student there, you volunteer at like any sport that'll take you basically. I did the attendance clicker at soccer games, and I wrote stats by hand at track and field meets, and I did, women's basketball, writing out stats, and men's basketball is, obviously the thing most people want to get into at Syracuse.
Boeheim years.
Yeah, exactly. The Boeheim years, by the way, being my entire lifetime until last year. By the time I was born, he had already been coaching for 8 years, so it's my entire lifespan. I did absolutely everything I could get my hands on all 4 years there. And it taught me so much about sports PR and like really launched me into...
What a benefit. I mean, you're studying
Yes.
it there and it's on the job training at a
Yes.
big D1 school like Syracuse that has, and Boeheim's a legend, by the
Yes.
way. That guy was a great coach.
Yeah, and I got to work, we hosted an NCAA quarterfinal, so I got to work at that event while I was there. We hosted track and field finalists, things like that there. So got to work at tons of events and get lots of exposure, meet lots of people. And that was absolutely the launching pad to being able to be with the NFL at the next step.
I know you also worked at Madison Square Garden for Dolan. Was that before or after the NFL?
Before, because it was a college internship.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And that's a great, I mean, we were just there for a Duke basketball game at MSG. And I think Dolan still owns MSG, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I should know that because my husband works there all the time. But yeah.
Okay. All right. So then, someone just confirmed for me, he does still own MSG. So then the NFL came, was that the first job out of college then?
Yeah, so they do these, it's almost like an apprenticeship. It's a season-long full-time internship. So you're an intern, but you're there the entire season and it's 80 hours a week and you're there. It's your full-time
Similar
gig.
to your novel. Really,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
experience of the novel.
Yeah.
So did you start with the Giants or the Patriots?
The Giants.
All right, Giants first as an intern.
As an intern.
And then stayed on there after the internship or moved on to the Patriots?
So that in the interim, the NFL Europe, which doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be the equivalent of like a minor league for NFL. So it's in the off season between because you have these players that are like fringe and trying to catch on to a roster. So in the spring, they play in Europe and some of them are like allocated by NFL teams and they want to get some tape. They want to be able to get the attention of their teams and they're hoping to be able to catch on for training camp in the summer. So between the Giants year and the Patriots year, I did NFL Europe, which is, I describe it now. And it was just me running my own PR department, living in Europe in a hotel with 80 football players. I was the only woman working for our team. And we took buses and trains around Europe and played, almost NFL football games. And yeah, it was a bananas experience.
Oh, I can tell from the book. So the audience knows all of this is going to come into play with the book, The Snap, like the snap of a football. And I'm holding the book up now because you write with such authority about what it's like to work in an NFL franchise in a number of ways. Just, the dynamics of working in the office place, the male-female dynamic, the back office to the player, to the coach, to the owner dynamic. It's all in there. And yet, as a reader, we get to experience it through this amazing, crime thriller as well. But the backdrop has such credibility and is so much fun. So
thank you.
We'll stay with your work experience. And obviously, there's going to be some overlap between your work experience and the novel because that's the backdrop for the novel. But sticking primarily with the nonfiction you version, knowing that it plays into the fictional version, there are a number of things that happen in the novel. The media relations person plays such a role in protecting these players and coaches, coaching them to handle the media, and actually doing a number of sort of rescue operations. Some super drunk player is at a bar or a strip joint or something, and you're the person they call to come get them out of trouble and make sure they stay out of headlines. So is that something that happened or you saw happen or you personally had to deal with while you were at one of these franchises?
Oh, I don't know how much this is like Fight Club. I don't know how much I'm supposed to talk about that. I guess Europe, maybe I can talk about a little more. Yeah, there's definitely an element of that. That's a big part of a team's job.
A cell phone call comes to you saying, I'm at this place. I need help to get out of here.
Yeah. And listen, if you're in Europe, there's certainly an element more of there's a language barrier. You're in a little bit more trouble and that you can't navigate the situation as well as you could at home. And this was also, the mid 2000s where you don't have the facility of a smartphone the way that we have it today where you can get out as easily as you can. But yeah, there's an element of smoothing things over. There's an element of reframing a situation to help.
Did you ever have to go down to a club or something like that and actually fish somebody out of trouble?
I did. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, as I was
reading the book, it felt like Ray Donovan, like a fixer coming in to, solve a situation.
Yeah. I have a very innocent face and yeah.
How about there was another element of the book in terms of how much coaching you would give some of the players, and some are more and some are less receptive to coaching.
Yeah.
Get a very arrogant or, full of himself veteran player who's sort of like, I've got this, I don't want to hear from you. Other people are like, oh my gosh, help me deal with this media scrum. Yeah. So would you pull players aside and give them some coaching on how to address questions as they go to the press?
Definitely. And I wouldn't want to take anything away from, many players are extremely good at it themselves. So I wouldn't want to take away from the people that are naturally excellent at that, which is many, many, many of them. But often if there's a question that is going to come up that's going to be a difficult question, it can be helpful to have some sense of what angle you're going to want to take with it. Or, things can happen, let's say with the advent of Twitter and things can happen while they're playing a game and they don't even know about it. A comment has been made, a trade has been made, things like that. So they might be walking in blind to these questions. Yeah. So you're really just being an advocate for them to make sure that they know, hey, you're going to be getting this question. You might want to approach it this way. But yeah, that said, absolutely, you might get a full hand to the face as you're trying to be helpful and someone that just doesn't.
I noticed that, for people who are watching the NFL more closely, and I happen to be an Eagles fan, so I knew some of the Eagles storylines going. And it does seem like the media is always looking for an angle to get a headline, to create a controversy. And I remember with the wide receiver, A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown was reading a book on the sidelines, and Jalen Hurts was like, well, I've never seen him read a book, and it seemed like the media sort of latched on to that. Were you watching that storyline at all, and some of the Eagles locker room controversy and whether people were supportive or not of the quarterback, Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I felt like you couldn't have been reading the snap. It had to be inner excellence. You couldn't have been hanging on to my book. Yeah, I mean, I think that Jalen Hurts has built up a reputation, rightly so, as being a very even-keeled, likable guy, and that is going to go a long way. When he makes those kind of comments, you're naturally going to kind of side one way or the other. And so my husband is a sports writer, and so I naturally react a certain way to the media comments, right? Because they have their job to do, and seasons get long and get boring, and they have to come up with stories. Yeah, exactly. But I think if you're sitting there with a book on the sideline, you want there to be a story, right? You're not doing it because you don't want people to talk about it.
But did you feel like that was a pot shot by Jalen Hurts to because that's how the media sort of took it, like how he was mocking the fact that it was all performative to have a book because he doesn't even read books.
Probably a little bit. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit.
Probably.
there was some controversy already there. A.J. Brown saying, look, the guy doesn't throw to me. He's not a good pocket quarterback. He can run, but he can't, that sort of thing.
Probably.
There were some other parallels that I picked up on a little bit in the book in terms of, in this, and we'll talk more specifically about the book because you kind of have two timelines going. But in the later timeline, you have a veteran coach and a veteran QB, and they're kind of vying for, who's the big dog around the team. We obviously can see some of those things present day. Were you pulling from anything there, or just sort of stories, some influences that you could use to put on the page?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want anyone to think that it was directly lifted. It's very intentionally not directly lifted. I know that obviously I worked for the Patriots, and obviously there's a narrative around, Coach Belichick and Tom Brady, and there's a parallel there. But I tried very clearly to put in things that would distinguish those characters from, for example, I made the coach in this book very charming. I'm not sure that anyone would call Coach Belichick very charming. I didn't want people to say very clearly. Yeah, exactly. I have a friend.
It's an amalgamation.
Belichick's exactly.
5%.
Exactly. Yeah. I have a friend that wrote a book that was similar, and her coach, she had worked at Villanova, and she wanted to make sure that people didn't equate that coach with Jay Wright, and she made him a bad dresser. I thought it was funny, the things.
Jay Wright is a snappy dresser.
Is such a
so
snappy
he's got the
dresser.
Suit going. And,
the things you do to try to. I always give my characters, my main characters, not red hair because I want to make sure people know it's not me. Things like that you always differentiate.
Yeah. What year was the Brady-Moynihan breakup when you were working there?
I was there in 2008, and I think they broke up that summer, maybe.
Oh, okay. So Brady was already a big star. He'd already won some Super Bowls.
Yeah.
I mean, he's gone on to be an even bigger star over the next 10 years from 08 to 18 and to present day. He's, huge. But in 08, it involved not only Brady and Moynihan, but then Giselle, who was at that time the biggest of the three in terms of stardom. So as you're handling PR and media relations around that, Giselle certainly at that time was big enough to have her own media relations, organization devoted solely to her. So would you have to coordinate, here's how we're going to message all this? And
I don't think we messaged around his dating life because frankly, there was so much going on. I mean, the first day that I worked at the Patriots, there was I don't know if anyone even remembers it now, but the Spygate scandal where the Patriots were accused of filming the Jets practice.
So they could know what plays were coming?
So they could know what plays were coming. And so it's my first day there as an intern. They've had a massive scandal break out, and my job is to answer the phones. And so all these calls are coming in. I'm so angry. I'm so disappointed. We had someone call in. I think I referenced this in the book. Someone called in and he was furious because these are his Patriots and he believes in them. And he had just gotten the entire Patriots helmet tattooed on his head. And now this team that he believes in that deeply, he was so disappointed in.
And you were on the phone with this guy?
And I'm on the phone with him, and I felt like, gosh, buddy, who told you to do that? You know what I mean?
It's amazing that there actually is a department there that answers the phone. If someone wants to speak, you can actually talk to someone at the franchise.
You can talk to me.
Realize that.
Yeah.
What year was Deflategate? Were you there for that?
That was, I think, the next year. I think I got to miss that one by one.
Okay, because that would have been another huge...
That would have been another big one. But I was there the undefeated season. And so that was a real pressure cooker. He had started dating Giselle that year. So she was coming to the games, which was exciting. It was fun to see her. But I got to answer Tom Brady's fan mail. And it was a collection of like young boys that were excited and wanted his autograph, and women my age that would like a date and were proposing. And I think I put this in the book. They would send, you know, gift cards for our first date that I got to keep, and, you know, proposals and things. And then like older women that were very scolding about the whole situation. And it was a real hot basket of fan mail to sort through.
I mean, the only thing these days that's comparable to Brady and Giselle, of course, is Travis and Taylor. Yeah. Which we'll come back to that later in the lightning round. We've got some thoughts. So let's talk briefly about your process, because so you had your Syracuse undergrad internship, then you're in the NFL, then you go to law school, and you're currently a practicing attorney. You're in-house counsel for a healthcare firm now. And that's what you're doing as your day job as you write a novel. So how did you, just as a matter of process, how did you find time and get it all together?
Yeah, so I'm definitely in the 5 a.m. writers club. Okay. I have two young kids and one in college. So I write, I get up at 5 and I write basically until my girls wake up, which I think is kind of helpful, because I wonder if I had all day, if I would, you know, get a coffee and click around, and sort of knowing there's always a ticking clock. Yeah. It's like always a little deadline that makes me maximize the time.
That I totally, it's like a player with the coach's whistle. Like you need a whistle blowing, organizing and structuring the day a little bit. So it is nice to have that, like, I got to get up and go, because it's game time.
The downside is that I feel like, you know, sometimes, and I'm sure you experience this too, you can either be sort of in the zone or you're not. And there could be times when I feel like I'm really in the zone, but now it's time to do the school run. Or it's the middle of the day and I have a great idea, but you're at the day job. And I wish sometimes that I was able to kind of ride that wave when it comes, but that's just the way it is.
That does. I know what you're saying. And when that happens to me, I'm like, oh my God, the ideas are coming. I just have to like at least jot down a sentence or two. Like if I don't write something down, I'll forget it and then it's gone. And then I'll just be in the ether. And then I feel so... That's the worst feeling, to think that you've lost something that was really good and can't get it back. So at least I'll make short form notes and hopefully be able to recapture the flow.
Yeah, it's incredible how quickly it goes.
So when you were working in media relations at the NFL for either the Giants or Patriots, did you ever keep a diary or something that was a resource for you as you went back and wrote this novel?
I did. And if you would ever like to humble yourself, read your diary as a 23-year-old girl. I think I said to my agent, who is like a great partner to me in writing, she's so valuable to me. I think I said, you can tell that I really want this because I sat and read this entire diary. It was it was a rough experience, but incredibly helpful, because you forget how outsized the emotions are at that age. You know, you think of 23, 22 as adult, and it is, but it isn't also. You know, you're still really figuring a lot of things out about yourself. You're still having really large emotions, and it was eye-opening. I forgot how young I still was then. Yeah.
But it captured were there things in there that you had completely forgotten or repressed? I mean, I know based on what Poppy, your character in the novel, goes through, there are some very tough moments in the office, inner office politics and relationships and that are not easy for her to navigate as a young kid who doesn't, sort of seeking a mentor and, could certainly use one, and as we all could in those early years.
I had definitely forgotten a lot of the details, and a part of that I think is why, and it's part of why I wrote the book, my overall feelings about working in football are really positive. I had a great time. I still keep in touch with my bosses. We exchange holiday cards every year. I loved it. However, when I remember a lot of the individual instances, a lot really were kind of negative. And it's that like push-pull that made me want to write the book in the first place. And so, yes, reading through those diaries did remind me of a lot of like paper cuts that I think I had forgotten about because the overall sense of the experience is quite positive.
And it is, we'll get into more of this when we get into the snap specifically, but it's on the other side of that sort of social moat of the Me Too era. And so you were dealing with things that today it's like, well, that can't happen today. But back then it was sort of, pretty routine. This the small things, the paper cuts, as you say, like little things. Was there anything that from your first draft that you put in there that you later said, I think I better take this out. This cut's a little too close to the bone. Or anything that your Doubleday, right, is your publisher. Anything that the in-house legal at your mirror image of in-house legal over there said, you know what, we could get sued over this.
So we definitely had some conversations with legal where they wanted to know how true some things were. They wanted to have the same conversation you and I had about how exact some of the character profiles were. And so when I was able to explain that they were more amalgamations and not directly lifted, they felt better. There was one thing I wanted to take out that ended up left in, actually. There was a line about how the games don't stop when someone collapses right there on the field. So they weren't going to stop for this. And that was written before the Damar Hamlin incident where he did collapse on the field and went into cardiac arrest. I would have preferred, frankly, to take that out after that happened, and it was left in. I felt that was a little too close, but it is true. I mean, they didn't continue that particular game, but certainly they continued the season. And it's a tough business. It's a business, and there's a lot of money swirling around in that business, so it's high stakes.
Yeah. That reminds me, I wrote a novel about tennis, and it talked about performance enhancing drugs in it. And that was a long talk that I had at that time I was with Macmillan. So we talked with Macmillan in-house counsel because we'd gotten a letter from Rafael Nadal's camp saying, we want you to take out this whole section of the book that talks about performance enhancing drugs. And I remember I respected the general counsel there at Macmillan so much. She said, you know what? If they come after us, we'll take them on. Like, this is staying in. This is great. I was great. You got my back. Let's do it. So they went in.
You should say the name, though. It's Trophy Son.
Trophy Son. Yeah. It's the other. Thank you. Thank you for the for the promotion. How about who read early drafts of your book, if anyone? Your husband, maybe, as a sports writer?
No, because he writes for a living and he's such a good writer, it's more important to me that he think my writing is good than that he fix it. So I really don't want him to read it. I don't think he read it until it went to copy edit.
He gets the polished version.
Yeah.
Who does he write for?
He writes for The Athletic.
Oh, great.
So we actually met. He was covering the Giants when I worked there. And given the topic of this book, we didn't start dating until several years later. But that's how we met. And now he covers hockey for The Athletic.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
All right, well, on that note, let's get into the snap. So there's two timelines in there, and it's a fascinating look because you handle that sort of moat that we were talking about of the Me Too. So the one timeline is when Poppy, our main character, first gets a job really as an intern. And she's, as you were saying, the world seems so big. She's a little wide-eyed. She's looking for and in need of a mentor. And then the other timeline is a very seasoned Poppy who's kind of a badass and is, available as a mentor. It's sort of the other, she's come across this Rubicon of, she's now committed to working in the NFL, and she's made the sacrifices and done what it takes to succeed there. So can you talk about how you decided to set it up as this dual timeline?
Yeah, I think you mentioned before that the fulcrum in the middle really is Me Too. And I sort of wish it was the case that you could say this would have happened before and wouldn't have happened after. I don't think that's actually the reality of it. And I've gotten a bunch of emails from women that, especially younger women that work in sports now, that say how much it resonates with their experience. And I love hearing from them, but I'm kind of bummed out that it resonates so much, in 2025. But yeah, that was my thought process. I wanted someone who has completely clean hands at the beginning, but no agency. And someone who has has had to kind of like get down and dirty a little bit to get to this higher chair, but with that chair is able to like bring about some change. She can hire female interns, she can, advance the cause, but to get there, she's really had to compromise herself a little bit and let that be able to bring about a conversation of, is that worth it? And I think that's a genuine conversation we can have, and you can argue both sides of it.
Yeah. And navigate several relationships inside the office, but also has this sort of, I don't know, this circle of friends who are powerful women in the world of sports and business, that they kind of maintain this loose sisterhood of staying in touch.
Yeah.
That seems like it's a nice portion of the book where they, I don't know, like they sort of have to, it's not something a guy really would have to deal with. It's because there's so few that when they find each other, they're like, we need to stick together and kind of maintain this as a sounding board for each other as difficult events come up.
I think there's elements of it that you just don't recognize as a guy, and there's not any like malice behind that. You just wouldn't pick up on it. And I don't mean to keep using my husband as an example, but I have female sports writer friends, and comparing their experiences in that role. So like my husband, it's, as you all know, it's relationship building. So he texts all day and night, right? And late at night, because you're casual text, sending them off. Or if he's going to be in X city, he'll meet this scout for a beer or whatever. My female friend, if she's texting late at night, if she's meeting someone for a beer, it's not that she can't do those things, but they have completely different connotations. And so she can do it, but there's like a stutter step mentally before you do it. There's like that little barrier, and it really impacts the way they do their jobs. And it's not that she's an outstanding reporter. She can do all of those things, but it's just helpful to have someone who can understand that stutter step to talk to, because they have to go through it in their job as well. And I think being able to have that support group that, without having to explain it to them, just inherently knows, is really valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much territory that needs to be covered. It makes me think of, I've heard a number of stories about this, so I don't know if this is something you've ever experienced, but at some point people go in the locker room and women go in the locker room, and some players decide, I'm going to put some clothes on or I'm not. And so the woman comes through, and here's the guy stands up very deliberately, almost like a dog peeing for territorial. We'll just stand up buck naked and make that. I'm assuming you've had that experience. This is like any woman around sports who's had to go in the locker room has had that experience. Yes.
So by and large, I wasn't allowed in the locker room, which are team decisions that they make. And that's part of what goes into, not to like go too far afield, but in interviewing with different teams, some teams would say to me, like, we would hire you full time, but we already have a woman on staff. And that sounds so ridiculous to say, but I can also sort of understand what they're saying. Because if you have a 4-person PR staff and your management has made the decision that you're not going to have women in the locker room, and a majority of the job is in the locker room, and now only 3 of you can go in, and you're going to hire another woman, and now she can't go in, just a division of labor, that becomes too much of a strain for those other 2 people.
So are there NFL teams out there now who have a policy of no women in the locker room?
I don't know if there are full-time female staffers that aren't in the locker room. Interns, yes. And
they're not allowed in.
They're not allowed in the locker room.
Okay.
And that's a choice that they make just to sort of make their lives easier. And
that's NFL wide or franchise by franchise?
No, franchise by franchise. Yeah. And there are certain franchises, at least when I was an intern, that had a policy of no female interns. I'd be surprised if that was still the case, but at least if you think 32 teams and however many interns, and then some of them flat out don't hire women, and then, your pool gets smaller. So it gets complicated. In any event, when I was in college, there's no naked locker room altogether. The athletes get dressed and then people come in. So that always felt like it worked well. In NFL, that's not the case. But at least the teams I was with, there were no interns in the locker room, but female sports writers are in. And yes, players do that. They do it to the male sports writers too. If they don't want to talk, they'll hang out naked, because male sports writers don't like doing that either. And it'll just kind of keep people away. But I worked at a couple Super Bowls, and I was allowed in the locker room there. And I was assigned to a losing locker room at one point, and I had to bring someone to the podium. And surprise, surprise, he didn't want to go to the podium after losing the Super Bowl. And so he just kind of hung out naked, and I had to just stand there and stand there and stand there. And this is someone I've never interacted with before. It's not my team. And it's
Well, I love how you handle all these issues because you're not passing judgments. It doesn't sound preachy in any way. In fact, the book has great humor. It reminded me a little bit of Nelson DeMille, who writes,
kind.
Of course, great crime thrillers, but has this irreverent humor. And you have that same kind of irreverent humor tone throughout, and just sort of says factually, like, this is sort of how it is to be in there, which makes you really, it kind of brings you into these moments and inside the franchise in a great way.
Thank you.
So it's the Syracuse Bobcats. This is our fictional NFL franchise. You decided on Syracuse, obviously, because you're a mid-state New Yorker.
That's right. I felt like I knew that area well enough to write it, and they could sustain, it's a city that could sustain a franchise.
Yeah, yeah. So will we be seeing Poppy again in another book, or?
I don't think so. I feel like I kind of said what I wanted, and I ended it the way I wanted, and I think other stories will be other stories.
Well, I love that you used this as the backdrop. Did you decide to do it as this spoils nothing about the book. It opens with a murder. And so it's kind of a crime thriller, murder mystery set inside an NFL franchise. So you get the benefit of a murder thriller, but you also get to figure out what it's like to work in an NFL franchise. Did you always know you wanted to do a sort of a crime thriller book, or could it have been more of an office, sort of tell-all kind of book?
No, I think I like it being in a crime setting. And I like to think of it, being in that like thriller mystery. There's always like a whodunit, obviously, but I like to think of it as a what would you do? Because I try to put the characters in genuinely difficult circumstances and ones where it's not obvious which path you would take or which choice you would make. And I hope it raises some interesting conversations because it should be a hard choice, I think.
It totally does. And I find myself completely rooting for Poppy, but she isn't perfect. She has made tough decisions. She has made compromises, as you say. So it's the whole thing feels very real, and you can tell it's real. You can tell you have lived much of what, you're not investigating murders in real life, I hope, but sounds like you have been down to the bars to grab a few players in trouble and get them home without winding up in the headlines.
Yeah, so far.
By the way, were you, when the Brady Moynihan thing was going down, would you talk to Tom about how to play this out, or have some advice for him, or how did that all?
Absolutely not. No.
Did he seem nervous about how to handle it, or did he ever seem sort of uncertain about what the messaging should be? Because it was this crazy sort of love triangle, and a baby is then involved, and it was pretty convoluted there for a little while.
I'm trying to think of a circumstance where he would have ever cared what I thought ever about what he should have done. No, I was so far down that ladder. I mean, I had the mail, but no, he was so far up that rung for me. He wouldn't have. I feel like Tom Brady probably had his team side and then probably his own personal people that dealt with that kind of thing.
And I'm sure Giselle had her own team as well. I'm
sure, yeah. I think he's a pretty a lot of players are happy to have the team assist with those kind of things. And then there's the larger personalities that really that exist as a brand, and he's a brand. So I'm sure he has. It's
fascinating to me that as some of these players become brands, their fashion goes crazy. Like I'm looking at what every once in a while there's a photo of what Travis Kelce is wearing into the stadium. Like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah.
Like, dressed like a normal person. It goes crazy with the fashion.
I know. I feel like maybe these are the signs that I really am getting older and it's just not for me anymore. Maybe I've just aged out of understanding what fashion is.
That could be it. We don't even know. He looks amazing and we don't even know it.
It could be. Yeah.
One question for you. Actually, this will come up in the lightning round, but I noticed I was looking at your media tour and things like that, and I saw you did the Bryant Park event, which is outside the New York Public Library on 42nd Street in Midtown Manhattan. And it's this outdoor. You did it in August. I think I did it years ago, and I was paired with Jay McInerney, who I love, and then he and I have stayed friends. But we did an event together out there, and it's just the most bizarre place to do an event. It's super fun, and you're in this wonderful place outside the library in this park, but it basically gets a corporate lunchtime crowd. So you sit there in this, captain's chair, like a folding chair, and you start talking about your book, and you just see people coming and going. Like they sit down for 5 minutes with a salad, and then they've got to get back to the office, and someone else comes with a sandwich or something, and it's this totally transient audience that you have for a little while.
Yes. My panel was debut authors, and so we had we were like all different jobs. Someone had written a cookbook, someone had written a memoir. There was like me. And so everyone had their family there, right, to cheer. And then, like you said, there was the transient lunch. And then there were the people that like just wanted to sit because it was New York and they were hot and they were moving. As like a book lover, to be in the shadow of the New York Public Library on like a beautiful day, that's such a cool experience. And I loved it for that. But yeah, an eclectic group for sure. I love that they do that, though. They make such beautiful use of that park now. And it feels like every day they have such cool programs going on.
Yeah, it is fun. All right, so on to the lightning round.
All right.
With Elizabeth Staple. Elizabeth on the book jacket. Beth, to you and me now. Your favorite book as a kid?
Oh, so anyone that's watching this and sees me, any redhead with a temper, it's Anne of Green Gables. That is an icon to all of us. And I now have a redhead with a temper. And we have read all the Anne books together. And yeah.
Oh, that's great. How old?
She's 9.
9.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Book or books you're reading now?
I'm always guilty of reading many at once. I don't know if anyone else does this, and then you kind of get them all to the 100-page mark, and then whichever one is grabbing you the most, like, takes off. So the one that's taking off the most at the moment is a reread of Travels with Charlie, which is John Steinbeck, and it's nonfiction, and he and his dog just kind of travel around the U.S. and they talk to people. It's lovely. It's like short and just really, really nice.
Oh, that's great. So you have a broad range of reading.
Yes.
Going back to Steinbeck and then present day. I've seen you post some things online about some books that are, just out, and it's nice to read your friends once in a while.
Yes. A lot of my reading this year was my fellow debuts. You try to support them and read their stuff. And
Strangest question you've ever gotten at a book event?
So it was at Bryant Park, right? Which is a good setting for strange questions. After you speak, you sit in those stools you mentioned and people can come up and sign or ask questions. And someone came up to me and he said, if I buy your book, will you get me tickets to a game? And I said, I don't know if that's like the economic exchange that you think it is.
Right, that's a great value for you. These tickets are like $300 now.
Totally. So I declined, but I did sign his book. And I wish him luck with the tickets.
You're still in touch with folks at the Giants and at the Patriots?
Yes.
Yeah. And have they, I assume many have read the book and come back with some thoughts? They
have. And I thanked them genuinely, I had a wonderful time. I'm really grateful to all of them. And so they all had nice things to say and I have nice things to say about them. So they've been great.
Anyone that you rescued from a nightclub come back and say, thanks for not putting my name in there or making it too close to the truth? Not
to sound like Jalen Hurts, but I don't know if that person is a big reader.
Okay. All right, now on to some NFL-specific questions. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, are they going to go the distance?
I guess I hope so, right? It feels strange to root against anybody's relationship. So, I'll root for them.
Okay, so my follow-up is going to be like, what's the over-under on duration? But you're just going to say they're going to make it.
Yeah, why not?
All right, good. I mean, all evidence is sort of against them in terms of track record of, that kind of a thing, but hopefully they'll do it. And I just read somewhere that he's actually going to play one more year.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's not the way I'm going to go out. So good for him for getting back on the field. All right, well, the Eagles repeat in 2026.
I don't know if I can take. I know you're a fan. I hope for you that they do, but I don't know if I can take it as a suffer. So Giants are my team.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Obviously, we're not
fan. That's hard.
In it, but I don't know
the
if I can take
Saquon thing makes it even tougher to swallow.
Yes, he seems like a lovely person.
He seems amazing. Yeah. He's my favorite athlete in the world right now.
I'm happy for him, but I don't know if I can take it if they do it again.
Once is enough for you, or whatever. Once with this particular squad. I love Jalen Hurts. I'm really coming around on too.
He seems great.
I was more in the AJ Brown camp.
Okay.
But he played so well in the Super Bowl that I think a lot of the people who were saying this guy is not a great pocket passer saw him just put on such a good performance. So
he seems great, and he has an all-female management team.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think his lawyer, his agent, his what's the other one? He has like a team of 3 or 4 people, his reps, and they're all women. So
all right,
kind of cool.
He seems like a classy guy.
Yeah.
All right, to the novel The Snap. Who would you cast as Poppy in the movie?
I'm hoping I pronounce her last name correctly, but Melanie Lynchky from Yellow Jackets and many other things. Lynchky. She's who I thought of while I was writing it. And
so you actually had that image in your head. That's interesting. Some people actually do pick someone just to know as they're writing. It's just like, all right, I need a face just personally for the writer.
Yeah. I think she has a good balance of like classy and like can get that right note of like rage, you know? I like the balance that she strikes. So that's what I imagined while I was writing.
Would you have to age her up and down for the two timelines, or would you have a separate actor play the early version?
I think you'd have to have a separate, and I don't know what to do about that. Some young starlet would get her shot.
Okay.
So.
I love it. All right. The piece of advice you'd offer a 22-year-old in the year 2025, a present day 22-year-old entering media relations for an NFL franchise, what would you advise that person? Or really like any sort of corporate, high stress, high stakes corporate environment?
I mean, this is tough. I think there's a balance of you have to be willing to do some work, right? You have to be willing to do some work that's not entirely glamorous work and be willing to earn it a little bit. And then the other side of that coin is to not be taken advantage of. And so finding the balance between those two things, I think. So I have my stepson's in college now, and we give him advice as he's like getting ready to enter the workforce. A lot of his contemporaries have a tough time as they start their first job, where they're maybe not prepared to begin in those beginning roles, and they want to start like 4 or 5 steps up, and you have to explain, no, this is where you start, and you have to be willing to start there. But at the same time, especially for young women in those roles, making sure that you're finding that fine line where you're not sliding into positions where you're being taken advantage of. Yeah. And it's a tricky balance.
So it sounds like the advice is not gender specific, but if you put it into practice, the pitfall is maybe slightly different if you're a man or a woman.
The connotation, I think, could be a little different, and that's the tricky part.
Yeah. Well, last question for Elizabeth Staple. One piece of advice for the audience.
I think the best advice to give anyone is to be genuinely curious. I think curiosity is the best attribute you can have, to be open-minded and ask questions about things that you think you may have no interest in whatsoever. But it's a pretty interesting world out there. And if you keep your mind open and ask questions, you can uncover some pretty good things.
That's great. I love that. Well, thanks for coming in. I enjoyed the early old-fashioned.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you.